Hey guys, what's up? My name's Chopper. So today, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be something quite different. I was laying in bed the other day and I thought of a really good video idea to talk about, and this is what if PUBG was in second person perspective instead of just first and third. Now, if you've played Battlegrounds at all, you know that the main staples of this game includes two different game modes. We have TPP, which stands for third person perspective, and that's the gameplay that you're seeing right now where the camera is sort of backed up, and then we also have first person perspective, which is through the eyes of that character in game. You guys know those are the two most popular and playable perspectives that we have in PUBG. But just what if there was another perspective you could play in PUBG in second person? Would it even be possible? If so, what would that even look like? That's what we're going to be discussing today. It's going to be a fairly interesting concept. Some of this might be a little bit hard to follow, so I'm going to explain it as best as I possibly can. But if you guys do go on to enjoy today's video, then please make sure to drop a thumbs up. I thought this was a really unique thing to talk about. And if you'd like to maybe see more stuff like this, then show me by leaving a like rating. Of course, subscribe if you are new to the channel. If this is the first video you've ever seen of mine, we are less than 1,000 subscribers away from 250,000, so every single new sub helps. Thank you guys so much. And also, I'm going to be streaming tonight on my Twitch channel the day this video goes live, so if you'd like to catch me streaming, then make sure you click the link in the description, go follow my Twitch channel, and I'll see you tonight and every other night for the streams. So before we can discuss how second person would work in PUBG in this context, we need to understand the other perspectives first. So we'll start with first person perspective in PUBG. Now, this is one of the most popular ways to play. It's also the most competitive way to play, in my opinion, and as you guys know, the point of view that you get in first person perspective is the camera essentially is the character. You're looking through the eyeballs of your player. If you're playing FPP in PUBG, there is no physical way you can get your camera or your perspective anywhere outside of the eyeballs of your player, and that's an important distinction to make for later when we talk about third person perspective and also second person perspective. Now, the reason why FPP is considered to be more competitive in PUBG is because of the fact that you, the person playing the game, don't have any other outside information other than what the character is getting, and so these things are important to distinguish between. When we talk about third person in a minute, you'll see why you and your character are different people in a way. But generally, first person perspective is pretty easy to understand. FPP, you kind of get as a player that you are the character. You and the player in game are one. This is the most simple way to step into that character's shoes and become them as close as possible, and that's why a lot of people really like FPP and just first person shooter games as a whole, because you, the person, are in direct control of the character's movements and actions, and everything received to that character is also received to you. In some sense, there's no distinction between you, the player, and the character in game. So that's our first kind of person perspective in PUBG. It's fairly easy to understand, but let's talk about third person. So TPP, or third person perspective, in PUBG works a little bit differently than first person and is a bit more complicated. Now, the reason it's more complex is there's really two kinds of third person points of view. There's third person limited and third person omniscient, and the way that PUBG seems to work is that you're in third person limited, where essentially you are not your own character. You're sort of watching it in a sense from behind a screen. While you are technically controlling your character in game, there is a disconnect between the player and the person. The person is more accurately represented by the camera that's behind the character. Now, you are directly involved with what the character is seeing, what's happening to it, and also the actions that you are performing and receiving, but in some sense you are completely behind all of that and you're watching it from almost a bird's eye view. Now, it's not quite omniscient because you don't know exactly what's happening with every other character in the game. You are only acutely aware of what's happening with your own person. What a lot of players like about third person perspective is the fact that you are not exactly the character. Because there is that disconnect and that distinction, you are more or less the camera that's following that character around, and that can do some really interesting things when it comes to how you read the game. Third person perspective in PUBG essentially involves you watching over the character in a way, because if you are the camera, your job is to keep that character safe. But ultimately, what's different about third person as opposed to first person perspective is that there is a distinction between the person and the player, whereas first person, there is not. You are directly involved with that character. I know this is kind of like technical and kind of hard to understand, but I just want to be crystal clear about the two perspectives we have in PUBG before we talk about second person, because that's where it's actually going to get really messy. But I think as a whole, most of you guys understand the two differences between first person and third person, why it's in PUBG, and why people prefer those perspectives. But second person is an entire can of worms that we have to get into. Now, there's a reason why second person perspective is very rarely used, not only in books and literature and stuff like that, but also in games. You don't ever really hear about a new video games coming out that is a second person shooter. You know what I mean? Like, you hear FPS games, so first person shooter, and you hear third person shooters, but second person is very, very difficult to execute. So I guess we're going to call this SPP for second person perspective in PUBG. Now, the way that second person is used in terms of like its literary function is second person's a point of view where the narrator tells the story to another character using the pronoun you. So basically the narrator in this case is telling the story, but is telling it to you, the audience. Now, this gets particularly difficult for video games because basically the narrator, or I guess what's happening in the story, in this case what would be happening in your match, is being told to you. Now, let's say for instance SPP is a thing. You're playing a match in that. What it would generally look like is something where the game or the narrator, quote unquote, is telling you what's happening. So for example, it would be like you walk into a room, you find an M416, you find ammunition. The difference here with first person perspective is if you were describing what's happening in your game, you would say, I found X amount of loot, I found this gunfight happened to me. In FPP, your character and you as a person or a player are exactly the same thing, so you would describe everything using like I and me. So in second person perspective, the distinction here is it would be another person, so in this case a narrator, maybe a narrator of the entire game, would be telling you what's happening to you and what's going on. Now, the reason why I say second person perspective is really hard to do because let's just imagine a single player game, for example, written, let's take the PUBG single player game that's coming out very soon and write that in second person perspective, and if it was there, what would it be like? That would mean the story is being told to you from a narrator's perspective, what's happening to you, the player, and in some sense, it doesn't matter where the camera angle is. You could be playing through the eyes of that character, but if there's a distinction between you and that character, I know this is kind of like technical, but that's where second person perspective comes in. And even first person in PUBG, it should probably be more classified accurately as second person. Because as far as you, the player, being your in-game character and seeing through their eyes, you are still at the end of the day separate entities. I know this is very strange. If we want to get really technical about it, technically FPP and PUBG should be SPP. But to make everything kind of clean and simple, we call it first person perspective. Same thing with every other video game, and to some degree that is true, and there's overlap between first person perspective and second person. Now, we can take that a step further and talk about where the SPP camera angle in PUBG would be. Now, you wouldn't be seeing the story through your own character, nor would you be from a background. You would be looking through the eyes of another character. So I know that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but stick with me here. Imagine you're watching your own character. You're still in control of it too, but you're seeing it through the eyes of maybe like another player. But this is going to work much better in games that have like AI characters and not everybody who's player controlled. But let's say, for example, that there were players that aren't exactly controlled, and you would be seeing yourself through that character's eyes, which is really weird. But potentially in PUBG, the perspective of the camera would be from your enemy, but you would still be in control of your character fighting that camera angle in a way. So this way you have all of the pieces, right? The narrator, which is basically what's happening in your match with because that's basically what's happening is you have the kill feed, you have what's happening to your character, what's happening in the world around you is the story, right? And it's being told from the narrator, which is essentially as the match plays out. Your character is obviously yourself, but in second person perspective, you would be seeing you through the eyes of someone else in the game who's being told the story, i.e. what's happening in the match, from the narrator, which is basically the game itself. Now, there have been a few games in the past that have successfully pulled this kind of perspective off, and it can really be a unique game experience that not a lot can pull off these days. But as far as like having a second person perspective in a game like PUBG would be extremely difficult and would actually require some new mechanics to be a thing. Because as everybody's player controlled, there's nobody else where you could have your camera perspective unless they did a thing that would tie well in with the story where you're basically watching your character from the eyes of like maybe one of the game makers of PUBG. The people who essentially run the battlegrounds in the story. Maybe you'd be looking through the eyes of PlayerUnknown himself. That would be second person perspective. Now, there's also another kind of second person perspective that wouldn't really work in PUBG, and this is just for text-based games. Something like Zork always goes in second person, but aside from that, this is pretty much the only way that Battlegrounds would ever be able to pull that off. Now, trust me, that would be really unique and something they could play around with potentially in the single-player game, but as far as having it in the BR, it's possible, but it would be very difficult to do. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying PUBG needs to add an SPP mode to the game just because that would be absolutely ridiculous. I don't even know how they would develop that, but I'm saying just as a concept, it is possible, and it's something that I think is worth talking about because a lot of people don't really understand why there isn't a second person perspective and why there's only FPP and TPP and the distinctions between the two. I honestly don't know why this idea came to mind to talk about second person perspective in PUBG. I guess like I had a comment that was talking about why that there's only these two that that exists. Now, there also is fourth person point of view, and I'm not even gonna dare get into that in this video because that's gonna be another complete mess to explain. But I tried to make this as clear and easy to understand as possible, and I really hope you guys did enjoy this. I know this is something really different. I didn't really think I'd be making this video today, but if you guys want to see maybe more stuff like this, then let me know what you think down below in the comment section, and drop a like on the video if you guys enjoyed. I had a really good time putting this video together, and it was an interesting topic to explore, and they might play around with it in the single player game that's coming out. I really hope they do, as that would be an absolutely great experience, but we're gonna have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Is SPP a thing that you could see happening to PUBG, or something that could be developed? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, guys. Make sure you do hit that like button if you guys enjoyed, subscribe if you are brand new, and go follow me on Twitch. Will be linked down below in the description. I'll be streaming tonight, so make sure you come over there and catch the stream. But I'll see you guys in the next stream or the next video. Take it easy, and peace out.